Tonight, fears of a wider war in the Middle East soar after an unprecedented attack. Iran strikes Israel, firing hundreds of missiles and drones at the Jewish state. Israel's Iron Dome and allies fending off the brunt of the aerial assault. Iran retaliating for the Israeli attack in Syria, killing top commanders.
I'm Deborah Patter in Tel Aviv with the latest on what happens now.
Plus, President Biden's phone call with Prime Minister Netanyahu will have the latest on the U.S. response. Also tonight, former President Donald Trump set to make history in a New York courtroom, the first former or sitting American president to ever face criminal prosecution.
I'm Chanel Call in Lower Manhattan, where the search for 12 impartial jurors begins tomorrow, and Trump's defense could again argue for a change of venue.
And later, ride 'em, cowgirl. The pint-sized champion showing the big boys how it's done.
Because I know if I try again, I'll always get my goal.
This is the CBS Weekend News from New York with Jerika Duncan.
Good evening and thank you for joining us on this Sunday. Tonight, there is an international scramble to stabilize a situation in the Middle East. Overnight, Iran launched hundreds of missiles and drones at Israel in response to its deadly attack on Iranian diplomats. The UN Security Council today met for emergency talks following the unprecedented attack. Israel urged the council to impose all possible sanctions against Iran. Also today, President Biden met with G7 leaders by video conference amid fears of further escalation. CBS's Deborah Patta is in Tel Aviv with the very latest.
Good evening. Last night's unprecedented Iranian attack on Israel is the scenario everyone has feared since the October 7 Hamas attack, a state-to-state confrontation that could spiral into a regional war.
Iran's first ever direct attack on Israel, dragging their shadow war into the open. Israel's powerful air defense systems intercepted more than 300 Iranian drones and missiles. Hardline Iranian supporters celebrated the strikes as the regime boasted their Operation True Promise had exceeded expectations. Israel's war cabinet favors retaliation, but is divided on timing. A former senior Israeli diplomat to the U.S., Alan Pincus, told us the stakes are high for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
If the U.S. puts its weight on him not to retaliate, he will be basically paralyzed and incapable of reacting. He could go ahead and do this, but the risk would be extraordinarily high.
Pincus said Netanyahu has wanted to escalate the conflict with Iran since November to detract from his political problems at home, including growing anger over his mishandling of the war in Gaza. For Palestinians trapped in that war, there is no distraction from the misery. Tired of living in tents, thousands defied Israeli orders not to return to the northern part of Gaza. We're dead either way, Sujud Abu Obaid said, and I'd rather die in my home. But some never made the perilous journey home. More than 20 injured were rushed to hospital after Israeli soldiers opened fire, killing at least one woman. Everyone else was forced to turn around with the menacing sound of fighter jets overhead, terrorizing young children already traumatized by more than half a year of war.
The worst was avoided in last night's Iranian attack. There was only minimal damage to an Israeli military base. But, Jerika, a further escalation of this conflict that nobody wants is still not out of the question.
Deborah Patta, thank you for your reporting in Tel Aviv. Here back at home, the Biden administration said their support for Israel's security is ironclad. But behind the scenes, the president clearly working to avoid a full-scale war in the Middle East. CBS's Skylar Henry is at the White House with more on that. Skylar.
Hey, Jerika, good evening to you. Well, President Biden spent Sunday making calls to both foreign leaders and members of Congress, stressing continued support for Israel. A U.S. official with direct knowledge of the conflict in Israel tells CBS News President Biden told Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu America will not participate in a retaliatory strike on Iran following Saturday's drone and missile attack, though the administration says it will protect U.S. forces and troops in the region if they're threatened.
They wanted to cause damage, no question about that. But they were utterly unsuccessful in doing so.
Senior administration officials called Israel's defense, quote, spectacular, touting the extraordinary level of coordination from allies to help. But the challenges still remain in the region and with public perception.
What I think Israel should do is pause for the moment, consult with its close allies and partners, assess the damage and the activity, and then decide what is the most appropriate response.
A new CBS News poll released Sunday, gathered before Iran's attack, shows nearly 40% of Americans want President Biden to encourage Israel to stop military actions in Gaza. 63% of Americans say that more humanitarian aid should be sent to Palestinians, but most Republicans polled still oppose that. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill agree Israel needs support, but what that measure looks like is still in question.
The best way to help Israel rebuild its anti-missile and anti-drone capacity is by passing that supplemental.
And Skylar, as the Iran-Israel conflict is getting a lot of attention, some lawmakers have been sounding the alarm about how to bring Ukraine aid up for a vote. What do we know about that?
Yeah, well, President Biden has urged Congress to pass a $95 billion supplemental aid package that would include funding for both Ukraine and Israel. But Republicans want stricter immigration policies at the U.S.-Mexico border in exchange for getting more aid to Kyiv. As for Israel, Speaker Mike Johnson said today a House vote on a security package is coming this week. Whether Ukraine is included is unclear. Jerika.
All right, Skylar, thank you. Well, an update on that deadly mall attack in Sydney, Australia. Police say it was not terror-related. The man fatally stabbed 6 people and injured at least a dozen others Saturday before police officers shot and killed him. Investigators say the attacker had a history of mental illness. Today, the country's prime minister praised the officer and bystanders who, quote, ran towards danger. Well, Monday, jury selection begins for Donald Trump's hush money trial in New York City. It is the first criminal trial of any president in American history. CBS's Chanel Call is outside the courthouse where it is all going to unfold. Chanel.
And Jerika, Trump is required by law to show up at this Manhattan courthouse tomorrow in what's being called the trial of the century. Speaking at a campaign event in Pennsylvania Saturday, former President Donald Trump teased his upcoming criminal trial.
I will be forced to sit, fully gagged. I'm not allowed to talk.
Trump faces 34 felony counts of falsifying business records, accused of covering up a $130,000 hush money payment to porn star Stormy Daniels in the run-up to the 2016 presidential election. Tomorrow, prosecutors and Trump's defense team will begin questioning more than 500 potential Manhattan jurors. They'll need to agree on 12 plus alternates.
The defense is very interested in seeing if they can show that through the jury selection that they can't really get people who might be quote unquote fair and impartial. They will continue to move for a change of venue.
Judge Juan Merchant is overseeing what's expected to be a 6 to 8 week trial. Last month, he issued a gag order. Twice last week, Trump disparaged his former fixer Michael Cohen, who already pleaded guilty for campaign finance violations.
The judge has said that if Donald Trump violates the gag order, that the first sanction will be that he will not get to know the jurors' identities.
And some legal experts say prosecutors and Trump's defense team will be closely looking for stealth jurors, people who lie to get on the jury. Jury selection is expected to take weeks. Jerika?
Yeah, longer than normal. Chanel Call, thank you. Tonight, American Scottie Scheffler captured magic at the Masters. CBS's Omar Villafranca is at Augusta National with more on that. Omar.
It was tight at the top of the leaderboard for the start of the final round here at Augusta National. But for the second time in 3 years, Scottie Scheffler is your 2024 Masters champion. Scottie Scheffler drained his final putt on 18 to win the Masters and earn his second green jacket at Augusta National. The 27-year-old started the final round 1 stroke ahead of the field and held on to the lead. Tiger Woods made the weekend cut for a record 24th straight time, but Woods finished near the bottom of the leaderboard. This year's Masters is also special. CBS sports legend Vern Lundquist called his last tournament. The total purse for this year's Masters is $20 million, with the winner taking home a record $3.6 million, the coveted green jacket, and an invitation to next year's tournament. Jerika?
Not a bad assignment, Omar. Thank you. Straight ahead on the CBS Weekend News, big cat closure, what drivers need to know about the world's largest wildlife crossing. Plus, some potential good news ahead of the tax deadline. They deserve those cheers. Today, the University of South Carolina women's basketball team flooded the streets of Columbia to celebrate their national championship. The Gamecocks brought home their 3rd title last weekend, as you may recall, after defeating Caitlin Clark and the Iowa Hawkeyes. Well, tomorrow night, Clark is expected to go #1 in the most anticipated WNBA drafts in recent years. Well, starting this week, one of California's major freeways is closing for cougars. The 101 freeway will shut down overnights in the Santa Monica area for construction of a wildlife crossing. Crews will install about 80 concrete beams that weigh up to 140 tons each over the freeway. Wildlife advocates hope the crossing will save local big cats from extinction. The project is expected to be completed by 2025. And tomorrow is the last day to file taxes or request an extension. The IRS says about 1/3 of you still need to file. The agency expects 19 million Americans will file for an automatic extension because of inflation. Standard deductions are higher, and more Americans are expected to see bigger refunds this year. Still ahead on the CBS Weekend News, rising from the ashes, the American helping to restore the Notre Dame Cathedral to its former glory. Tomorrow marks 5 years since the fire that nearly destroyed Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. Since then, there's been an extraordinary effort to save and restore the centuries-old landmark, including by an American craftsman. Here's CBS's Elaine Cobb.
Last year, Hank Silver was running a small carpentry business in Massachusetts. Through a contact in France, he was offered a rare chance to join a team in Normandy preparing timber to rebuild the nave of Notre Dame.
I could not say no to that opportunity. It's an opportunity that happens once in a lifetime, wouldn't even be the right term. It's once in a millennium, really.
The monumental task of restoring Notre Dame after the 2019 fire called for artisans skilled in traditional building methods.
We first hewed all the logs using axes in order to recreate that rippled finish that you were able to see in the original cathedral in the 13th century framing.
There were unexpected challenges.
The architects asked us to reproduce all of the deformations that had accrued over 800 years. So the ridge is not a straight line, and so we had to follow this curvature.
Then he came to Paris to set the timber trusses in place.
Many carpenters came from United States, from England, from Denmark, from Spain, because they were fond of these techniques, fond of oak. They come to work on Notre Dame, and it's a very fantastic spirit.
There's still a lot of work left to be done to restore Notre Dame to its former glory, but everyone here is confident it will be ready for the planned reopening in December.
4 months ago, the spire rose again into the Paris skyline, topped with a recreation of the original gold cross and rooster. The rooster holds several holy relics, but also
They created a second chamber, and it's got a scroll with the names of everybody who worked on the cathedral.
Oh wow,
Isn't
there are
that cool?
names in there.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
That is supremely cool.
Yeah, it's right up there.
Okay.
Protecting the city.
with his work on the restoration almost done, Silver says he'd like to stay in France. He took advantage of a site visit by the French president to plead his case.
I did hand Emmanuel Macron a letter requesting French citizenship. He has not been texting me every day, much to my disappointment.
Hank Silver remains hopeful and says he's looking forward to seeing Notre Dame reopen at the end of this year. Elaine Cobb, CBS News, Paris.
Next on the CBS Weekend News, the Bay Area men taking a stand to help give riders a seat. It is a problem facing cities across America, benchless bus stops. In tonight's Weekend Journal, CBS's Itai Had caught up with some Bay Area men who refused to stay idle and stepped up with a seating solution.
When Daryl Owens and Mingwei Samuel noticed there were no benches at many bus stops across Berkeley, California, instead of sitting on their hands, they decided to take a stand.
This is just a way to make the world a better place.
For months now, they've become known as the bench guys, pulling up to bus stops and installing their own handcrafted creations.
We weren't looking for any fame or glory. Our goal is just to give people a place to sit.
It all started when one of their neighbors, who just got out of surgery, was forced to sit on the curb. That's when Daryl and Mingwei taught themselves how to build a bench on YouTube and even made sure they were up to city code. So far, they've installed 27 benches. Each one takes about 4 hours to make.
The goal is to get the cities to put these benches out.
They're already getting a sitting ovation from both city and transit officials. In fact, their project has pushed Berkeley to swap one of their benches for an official city bench.
Have they essentially lit a fire under AC Transit? Would you say that?
I would say a fire has been lit.
Jean Walsh is an AC Transit board member. She says this quirky campaign is forcing officials to find a solution to this deep-seated issue.
So many of our problems are hard to solve. They're complex, they're costly, they're really difficult. Putting benches at bus stops isn't one of them.
At the end of the day, Daryl and Mingwei head home, but not before taking a load off.
I love just like sitting on it and just take a little break and then, you know, go about your day after.
Putting officials in the hot seat while paving the way for more benches across the bay. Itai Had, CBS News, Berkeley, California.
Small change made a big difference. When we come back, meet the rising rodeo star never thrown off by her competition. We end tonight in El Paso, Arkansas, where a rising rodeo star is grabbing the competition by the horns while breaking barriers. Here's Sarah Horbakowitz from our CBS affiliate, KTHV.
On any given night in Arkansas, there's bound to be a cowboy roping rodeo. Doc Levy's been riding his whole life, so it's no surprise he made it a family affair.
When I see her, I know she could do it, and she just go out there and she just get it done.
His daughters all hopping on a horse as soon as they could walk, including 7-year-old Lathan.
When I ride, I feel like I'm a real cowgirl.
But she was interested in more than just horses. At 7 years old, she hopped on a bull.
I'm in there too, so let me try that.
Doc says she's the only black female in Arkansas riding bulls in competition, and the youngest, period.
The guys are always claiming to be toughest in the rodeo world. So when you hit a little girl that likes to ride animals like that, you encourage her to ride more and do more.
But breaking records doesn't come easy. And sometimes she needs a little help from the crowd. Before she decides to take her nerves by the horns and not only get back on, but stay on. Riding at a rodeo last weekend and taking home the gold.
Because I know if I try again, I'll always get my goal.
Still relying on that same support before getting up to ride again.
You rode him to the ground. Good job.
For CBS News, Sarah Horbakowitz in El Paso, Arkansas.
That is the CBS Weekend News for this Sunday. I'm Jerika Duncan in New York. Have a great night.